I just want to give a brief, not really review, but just sort of my take on the most recent 2010 Doctor Who Christmas special. After watching Sherlock, which was another show which um, Stephen Moffat wrote, he was the executive producer, he wrote the first episode for, and Moffat's previous work in Doctor Who, as well, especially in the fifth season, in the way that the story elements throughout the season sort of build together and then tie together in the end. I definitely see a pretty clear picture of what Moffat is trying to do with the show. For one, he's definitely trying to play to children. It's a show that appeals to a broad audience. There are people who are, in retirement homes, pensioners as they call them in England, who were probably watching Doctor Who in the 60s with their children when they were middle aged. And then you have all, this is a show that really cuts across all segments of society. And people were sort of wondering about Matt Smith and why pick him, why pick somebody so young as the Doctor. And my take on that seems to be that Moffat's idea is that he plays well with children, and he establishes that from pretty much the first scene of the first episode, the 11th hour, in which he has him interacting with Amelia Pond, and in this really goofy, humorous way that kids would like. Adults can say, okay, we can kind of just let this pass and that sort of thing. But he is acting more childish than the child in the scene. And I think that really sets the tone for why Moffat chose Smith, why he's sort of structuring a lot of things that the way he is, yet at the same time he is still writing very sophisticated television for adult audience without being adult. In many ways, I think the irony is that Doctor Who, you can have an episode in which people are talking about very complicated philosophical issues in one scene, like one I rewatched recently, which was a Charles Dickens episode that's related to the Christmas special, is that the Doctor goes from having this conversation about what sort of worldview to accept in the face of seeing what appears to be, from Charles Dickens' perspective, the supernatural, and just saying, not accept that everything you believe was wrong, just that there's more to the world. That's actually really profound philosophical dialogue for television at least. And the scene that immediately follows that, between Rose and the girl in the hallway, about their different perspectives. She coming from the 21st century, Eve Miles' character coming from the 19th century, and the differences in their perspective on the world. Yet again, another brilliantly written and sophisticated scene back to back in what some people might write off as a children's show. You have a show like Torchwood, and while Children of Earth is probably as dark and as well written as anything adult entertainment has to offer nowadays, large parts of it were almost more domestic and banal than many other things that you see in Doctor Who. So with Moffat's writing, it seems to me that he first of all, he has the audacity to sort of rewrite Dickens in his Christmas special, and to create this elaborate story that plays well to children, that makes beautiful pop culture references, that makes sort of uh, you know, what would it be? Meta meta statements, like when the Doctor is in the kid's bedroom and saying he's the new nanny, and then he's like saying, and don't say Mary Poppins, because that would be a rubbish comparison. And yet in the moments that before that, you see, that's exactly what he's at. Like, this is going towards Mary Poppins. You can sort of see that. And so Moffat in his writing is aware of what the audience is probably thinking in this scene, and sometimes plays with that. He sometimes just has these funny little things like, oh, you're 12, don't want to look under your bed. He's very clever. He's very good at sort of making pop culture statements and reinterpreting old stories. And to me, the Christmas special worked on many different levels. At points, I felt that it was slightly too long, and I got, maybe 3/4 of the way through and felt like, come on, this should be wrapping up by now. Um, but overall, I think in terms of the writing, the acting, the special effects, the lighting, all of these different things, they were pretty much on par with any movie that I've seen recently. I felt as satisfied after watching this episode as I had of watching any other sort of entertainment I have recently. There was a great sense of fulfillment. It was clever. It was, touching in its own way. It was, very well calculated, and it also reveled in its own absurd moments, like when the Doctor is, taking them all out on a Christmas ride, through the sky with a flying shark, and it's Victorian and futuristic and fantasy all at the same time. They just play with all of these things. There's a great, I mean, that's what I love about the show, is it's a great sense of play in everything. They could have these philosophical dialogues, which are actually, when you stop and think about what they're saying, are actually quite meaningful. And yet at the same time, there's still that joy and the romp of it all, and the ridiculousness, and it's a positive attitude towards everything. It can be a very violent show in which a lot of people die. It's always been that way. Even going back to, say, the 60s, some of the 60s episodes of Doctor Who were as violent as anything that you would see on television. They might have been gory and bloody, but I mean, when people died in the show, people died, and it's never shied away from sort of the darkness, so to speak. And nonetheless, it still kept a sort of positive attitude towards life. It could be a show where they just travel through the universe and see horror after horror after horror, and yet somehow they still manage to be upbeat and positive. And really, I think Moffat's writing is very clever. He ties things together very well, and especially seeing things like Sherlock, I think he sort of revels in that, like, look at me and look how I can, write a character like Sherlock Holmes, or write this, elaborate story in which everything sort of like pulls together and gives you, the audience, this sense of satisfaction. And sometimes they're ahead of the game, sometimes they don't quite see how everything's going to play together, and then it all comes together. I felt like with Russell T Davis's writing, a lot of his problems stem from the fact that he just can't like resolve the stories quite as well as Moffat could. That's not to say that Moffat always resolves every story perfectly, but I think that Moffat just delivers the ending in a way that's typically more on point and more kind of like haha than Davis did. Although Davis had a lot of great moments and wrote a lot of great dialogue. So the Christmas special, in other words, was awesome. I loved it. Fanboy gush, all that wonderful stuff. If you don't watch Doctor Who, then I would say what's wrong with you, but maybe you would hate it, maybe you would love it, whatever. If you do watch Doctor Who, then give me your thoughts, or, that's it. No more to say.